It's 2:05, time for the inquiry to resume. I'm particularly grateful for the advocates getting back after I took up a fair proportion of their lunch break in the discussion we had after the morning session. Just to say that we had a word about making the most efficient use of inquiry time and ensuring things proceed as efficiently as well as they can, while giving everybody a chance to put their point of view. And in particular, I think all parties have agreed to seek to avoid any duplication of evidence as we proceed. With that, Mr. Lintoft, you're partway through cross-examination of Mr. Woods.
I am indeed. Just one point of housekeeping before we recommence with Mr. Woods. I've been asked by Councillor Waterson of Dunsfold Parish Council what the chances are of his getting on to give evidence this afternoon, because obviously that's where he was in your timetable. I've said to him that from my perspective that there just is no chance, unfortunately, that he will have got to that stage of the procedure this afternoon. But I said that I would raise it with you so that he knows, because he just wants to know whether he can go and whether he should come back tomorrow and how he should deal with it.
I think what I would say is, Councillor Watson here, Councillor, if you've got a difficulty in terms of timing for tomorrow, after we've completed with evidence with Mr. Woods, I could slot you in then. Yes. This afternoon, that's right. Okay. That would be helpful. Thanks, Councillor. Thanks, Mr. Lintoft.
Thank you, Inspector. So, Inspector, moving on to my third issue then, the published character. And what I would like to do, Mr. Woods, is just to look through section 3 of Mr. Dudley's proof of evidence. And I just want to use the one we've been using up until now, really, which is the Appeal B one. So if you could just make sure you've got that in front of you.
Sorry, Appeal B.
Appeal B.
Yep.
And if you look at page 14.
Yeah, sorry, which
3.
CD?
CD 8B.2.
Okay.
So we've discussed published character and how that fits into the assessment process. And in terms of the published character that Mr. Dudley has taken into account, the landscape character areas that he lists in his section 3, you don't say that any of those landscape character areas are not part of the relevant published character to consider, do you?
I don't, but what I say is that as part of that, the character, it fails to take into consideration the Lydia Caravan site.
And so I will take you through just to check that we've got agreement on the way in which these various character areas are summarised and assessed by Mr. Dudley. But would it be fair for me to summarise the difference? Well, you've said it's the failure of those character areas to take into account, and I think you mean the wider Lydia Caravan site that you principally take issue with, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, there's obviously other things that have occurred since the publication of the character document, and there's been reference to those: the brewery, the fracking, the solar farms.
So clearly, key to the inspector's approach to dealing with this matter is going to be considering how the effect of Lydia Park is assessed by the parties. Yep. The impact of the wider Lydia Park scheme.
Mm.
Yep, that's fair, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's how the appeal sites are influenced, as it were, for want of a better word, by the existing Lydia Park caravan site
Well,
in terms of the landscape character.
Yeah, we're dealing with the published landscape character at the moment, so we'll come
Mm.
on and look at impact, but I'm just looking at the landscape character as part of the baseline that's set out therein. And so we're looking at the area at the moment and we'll look at impact later. So that's right,
Yeah.
isn't it? Your issue is with Lydia Park not being taken into account in
Correct.
landscape character. I'm grateful. But in terms of the way in which Mr. Dudley summarises it, if we look at 3.3, you're aware that the National Landscape Character Assessment is the Low Weald National Character Area. And I don't think you take any issue with, well, you certainly don't take an issue with 3.3 and the summary that Mr. Dudley comes to there, nor his 3.4 in terms of what the character area sets out, do you?
No, in terms of the national landscape, no.
And so we're agreed that in respect of that 3.4, the site and its setting are considered to be strongly representative of that area based upon 3.3. In terms of the local landscape character assessment, again, we're looking at 3.7 and we're in the wooded low weald landscape type, aren't we? So we're agreed on that, the type.
Yeah, under the national landscape is
Under
the
the
national
local one.
landscape.
The local
And
one.
that
The local one.
yeah, the local one. But you said that the character area refers to, one of them refers to the national landscape, so that's fine. And then in terms of the area that covers the appealed sites, then it says what it says, but I don't think it's an accurate reflection of what the character is.
So yes, so I was moving on to consider the particular wooded low weald landscape type, and you'll see at 3.7, Mr. Dudley has summarised those bullet points which are from the guidance and says it's strongly representative of that type. So that's not looking at a particular character area, that's looking at the type. And again, you don't take any issue with that in terms of what it says. I've noted your point.
No, I don't. And you've got things in there like field sizes. Field sizes are relatively small, predominantly laid to pasture, enclosed by tree cover and hedges.
And in terms of again, one of the conceits of the local landscape character area for this area is that we've got key positive landscape attributes that are listed. And Mr. Dudley deals with those at 3.9. And he's right to say, based upon that summary, isn't he, that the site and its setting represent the majority of those key positive attributes that are listed there at 3.9. So you certainly haven't suggested otherwise.
It's a whole long list. It could be anywhere in the country.
Yeah, but you don't.
Could be anywhere in the country.
But you don't. You've not taken, and you're not taking issue for the purpose now.
I'm not taking issue with that, except for the fact he ignores the caravan site.
And so, and there we come to it then. So when we look at the Grafton to Dunsfold Wooded Low Weald WW5, we can see that Mr. Dudley has summarised that character area within his 3.12.
But I mean,
3.13. Yeah. So the question for you is this: you don't disagree that the site and its setting are considered to be moderately representative of that character area, and you don't disagree that the main source of incongruity relates to the presence of the existing Gypsy and Traveller site to the south. Indeed, that's your point, isn't it? You agree with that. So can I just have your answer on that in terms of what he says at 3.13? That's something that you agree with, isn't it?
Well, he talks at 3.9 about the characteristics that are there. I mean, none of the appeal sites have ancient woodland on them.
But moving on to, we're looking at 3.12.
Oh, we're moving on now.
Yeah, so
fine.
that's where we're
fine.
looking at this character area, 3.12. So his text at 3.13 relates to the character area. And what I put to you is, he says it's moderately representative. And I don't think you certainly haven't said you disagree with that. And the reason for the incongruity, he says, is the presence of the existing Gypsy and Traveller site to the south of the axis, i.e. the wider Lydia Park. And again, you don't disagree with that. That is your point, isn't it?
Yeah, but the description above could apply to lots of places. It's not particularly special to this particular area.
So I've written down yes, but the
Just fairly
description above-
ordinary things that you'd see in the countryside.
But in terms of my question, that was a yes, yeah.
Moderately, if the word is moderately representative.
Yeah. And in terms of the incongruity relating to the Gypsy and Traveller site to the south, Lydia Park, you agree with that, don't you? You said yes.
Well, I agree with that, but that's not got in the list above, you know, so that's quite a big difference, isn't it? So you're moderately representative apart from the Gypsy and Traveller site,
No,
which is not just a site of 2 pitches, it's quite a large area of a number of pitches. So
what he's saying is it's moderately representative, and the main source of incongruity is the existing Gypsy and Traveller site, because, as you say, that's not referred to in the character area.
No.
So you agree with that, don't you?
it's not referred to, but what Mr. Dudley fails to take into consideration there is the other aspects. So we talked about the brewery, the solar farm, the fracking. That's not set out in the character of the area, but they have planning permission.
So in terms of what you've said within your proof of evidence, what you've relied upon is as being the key determinant within your 9.2 to 9.8 is the presence of Lydia Park. And I summarised what you said in chief.
Yeah, I know you did. Yeah,
You said it's intertwined with the wider Lydia Park. And that's your point. And that's what I'm moving on to.
That's my
describe.
point. But you draw me to this paragraph here, and what Mr. Dudley has done in his assessment, he hasn't in there taken into account the other matters.
So the question for you is this: what's key for this inspector is how he analyses the importance of the existing Gypsy and Traveller site at Lydia Park in any assessment.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's the point, isn't it? How the assessment deals with that issue, in your view, is very important.
Sorry to interrupt, but the questions that I put to Mr. Woods regarding the definition of area for the purposes of AHN4 included whether or not it included the other aspects of the area. And he referred to the fracking site and the brewery and the solar farm. And so when my learned friend says in evidence in chief, you only spoke about the caravan site, that's not correct. He spoke about all of these things as well.
No, I didn't say he only. I specifically referred to what I hoped uncontroversially was his key concern in terms of the way he's put it in his proof. And it wasn't in respect of your points, but I don't see him making a distinction in respect to questions put by Mr. Masters. But all I'm asking is whether that's an important consideration for the inspector when he's assessing the importance of those changes. And I think Mr. Woods accepts that.
Well, I think we're all agreed, sir, that when you were talking to Mr. Dudley, it's a site-specific analysis on top of the designation that matters.
That's a completely separate point. So when we're looking at how that issue is assessed, can I ask you to have a look within Mr. Dudley's assessment at page 25 and paragraph 4.23.
Okay.
So what Mr. Dudley has done as one of the receptors that he's identified for the purpose of his assessment, his transparent assessment of receptors, is the relationship with Surrey Hills AONB, isn't it? And we see that there.
I see that, yeah.
And in terms of how he's assessed that, do you see that he explains there that the boundary of the AONB lies approximately 160 metres to the northwest of the site boundary at Dunsfold Road? And you're aware of that, aren't you?
I see that, yeah.
He explains that Lydia Park is also overlooked by elevated land within the AONB, and he refers to the figure that we've looked at on page 20. So if you want to just remind yourself of that picture on page 20, just turning back a couple of pages.
Yeah, what he doesn't say there is, of course, Lydia Park itself is raised.
I'm coming on to there. But the picture.
So he ignores that. He ignores that.
Picture at paragraph on page 20 is showing that relationship, isn't it?
Page 20, yeah. So
Page
we
20,
have,
you see figure 5.
we have the close-up pictures.
Yeah.
Figure 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Figure 5. Site from site entrance, unauthorised surfacing and structures, and clear into visibility with Surrey Hills. Okay, let's have a look.
So
Well, you're not looking at a public view there, are you? It's not.
Well,
Yeah, that's a close-up view of mobile homes and cars on an appeal site.
so in terms of fact, are we talking about landscape character? But in terms of facts, he's right that that is the national landscape behind the appeal site and Hanscombe Hill rising behind it, isn't he?
Way behind, yeah.
Right.
But you don't. This is a view that you don't see from a national landscape.
And in terms of paragraph 4.24, so turn back to page 25. And just let me know when you're there, because I know it's frustrating to be scrolling through a sort of virtual document.
Okay.
So at 4.24, he goes on to look at the sensitivity of this receptor, which is the Surrey Hills AONB.
Yes.
And you'll recall from our discussion this morning that sensitivity is assessed by combining susceptibility and value. Yeah. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this paragraph 4.24, he's looking at the first of those elements, susceptibility. And he explains there that for the reasons he there sets out, the susceptibility is judged to be high. Yeah. Do you see
That's
that?
what he says, yeah. Disagree with that, but.
And then in terms of, well, it's his assessment, I mean, talking about approach. In terms of 4.25, in terms of the value of the receptor, he says, well, it's the setting of a nationally important landscape in this location, so that's judged to be high. Yeah, so you see that.
Yeah.
And then if you turn over the page to get to page 26, having looked at sensitivity and said that that's high.
Well, he says sensitivity is high, yeah.
He looks at the impact on the receptor. And in terms of the approach he takes there, can I ask you just to remind yourself of what is now paragraph 189 of the NPPF? So if you've got your copy that Mr. Cottle gave you of the NPPF, just have a look at the same page as the one we looked at before, but the bottom of the page. You should have there 189, yeah?
Yes, I do.
And if you turn over the page to 55, do you see the last line of 189 is talking about development which is within the setting of a national landscape. And what it says there is the scale and extent of development within all these designated areas should be limited, while development within their setting should be sensitively located and designed to avoid or minimize adverse effects on the designated areas.
Yep, I see what it says, yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of this development within the setting of the national
Well, no, I
landscape.
don't accept it is. It's not next to the national park. It's not next to the national landscape.
Hold on. So
It's set away from the national landscape.
So you said it's not in the setting
Because it's not next to it.
because it's not next to it. I
Correct.
see.
Let me just understand your answer, Mr. Woods. Is it your view then that something can only be in the setting of the national landscape if it's immediately adjacent to it?
If it's immediately adjacent, so this is 160 metres away in a.
No, I'm
in
not
a-
asking, I'm asking about a question about approach. Are you saying that to be within the setting, it's got to be next to?
In this particular case, I think that's correct. Yeah.
So Inspector, in the light of that answer, I'm not going to pursue any other questions on there. And so, but certainly that's the test that is set out in the in paragraph 189. And in terms of the way Mr. Dudley then goes on to consider Lydia Park, and remember I told you I wanted to ask about the way in which Lydia Park had been taken into account. We can see in 4.29 these words. He says, the proposed development would project an incongruous and intensive land use towards the AONB that is anticipated to result in harm to the character of its setting. Leaving aside, obviously, your point that you don't think it's in the setting. It would replace an area of naturalistic woodland and an overgrown hedgerow that currently exist in the separation of Lydia Park and the AONB with a domestic land use that's not sensitively located or designed. And the existing and authorised development represents a less sensitive approach. So
No, I thought that's fundamentally wrong, isn't it?
Yeah,
There's not an area of woodland, an overgrown hedgerow, that
that's
currently assists in the separation of Lydia Park and the national landscape.
That's what he says. The question that I want to ask you about it is that the way in which Lydia Park is considered and assessed by Mr. Dudley is within 4.29, and he considers it in terms of the importance of taking Lydia Park into account by looking at how the land that we're dealing with, these appeal sites, separates Lydia Park currently from the AONB. And he says that's an important function. So the way in which he assesses Lydia Park is in that context, isn't it? Now, you can say you disagree, but in terms of the way he's gone about assessing it, his transparent approach, he has taken Lydia Park into account. He's taken it into account in that way, hasn't he, Mr. Woods?
Well, you say he's taken into account, but he's made an error in terms of how he's assessed it. It's incorrect.
So you say he's made an error, but in terms of the way he's assessed the importance of Lydia Park.
So therefore, if you make an error, then you come to the wrong conclusion.
I'm looking at the approach. So leave out of your mind your view as to whether he's got it right or not. I'm just looking at the approach. The way he's assessed Lydia Park in 4.29 is by looking at it being harmful, as he said earlier on, but the appeal sites performing an important function, separating Lydia Park from the AONB. That's the way he's looked at it, isn't it?
Well, he's looked at it in that way, and I think it's a wrong approach. What you could have done if there was a belt of trees along by Dunsfold Road, if you had that there, that would serve that purpose. It just seems it's an artificial. You're trying to extend the national landscape into this area. That's what we're trying to happen there. Oh, well, okay. So we have this buffer. Well, you know, the line is a line. It's the national landscape. It's not national landscape.
Okay. And in terms of what he's done there, if I just remind you of the way in which the local plan deals with it, the wording we looked at before in RE32, the value of the AGLV is described as being retained for its own stake and as a buffer to the AONB. So the AGLV, part of its value, is as a buffer to the AONB. That's correct, isn't it? That's what the policy says.
That's what the local plan says. But as I've said, and the preceding paragraphs of that explain how the national landscape is going to be reviewed, and it is being reviewed now. And we get back to the point that this will not be a buffer anymore because it won't be in the area of Great Landscape Valley because it won't exist.
And then if I can ask you to turn back to, again, to the previous section. So I want you just to have a look at page 17 again, and in particular paragraph 3.14 when you get there.
Okay.
So paragraph 3.14 is looking at the character area which is to the north of the site, but within which part of the site's setting is located.
Right.
You follow that, don't
Yep.
you? Yeah. And you can see there that in respect of that part of the site's setting, so the area to the north, Mr. Dudley has identified the characteristics and emboldened them to say which ones that element of the setting complies with. Do you see that?
So it's not.
Just asking you whether you can see that's what he's done, rather than.
Well, no, it's difficult to see. Difficult to see.
So-
I mean,
so
there's a series of things there. You can't say that the appeal site lying within elevated and undulated landform rising to wooded green sand hills to the west.
So hold on.
So that's that there.
So
We can go through each one. So I don't think.
I don't propose to do that because that's not your evidence. I'm asking you about his approach, and it's important to keep in mind the question, which is the setting of the site. Part of the setting of the site, the north, complies with these characteristics.
Yeah, I don't accept that he's got it correct. No.
No, well, I mean, you haven't raised. I can't.
We've asked you the
take you through
question.
each particular one of these. I've asked you to the approach.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand the approach, and he's got it wrong.
No. But in terms of what he's done, you understand that's what he's done.
I understand what he's done,
And he's quite
but
right.
he's come to the wrong conclusions.
And he's
quite clearly.
He's quite right to do that because part of the setting does appear within that WW4 character area, doesn't it?
Oh, right.
Do you see? That's right, isn't it? He's not talking about just the site. He's talking about the site and its
Okay.
setting.
What part of it?
Talking
Can you show
about.
me on this plan here? What part?
Well, I just need
part,
a question.
please?
The area to the
No,
north.
I need to know where you specifically are referring to it, please.
So look at figure 5, again on page 20.
Figure 5, yes.
Do you see the land rising behind appeal site B there?
Yes.
Yeah. That is WW4 rising up behind you.
Oh, so you're saying so the landscape character area rolls over into the
No.
national landscape.
I'm saying that WW4 is visible in that picture, figure 5, and he's talking about those elements which are within WW4 in 3.14. Do you understand?
Well, I sort of do, but he's making the assessment wrongly, making the assessment from the access track towards that. That's a wrong approach because that's not what you see when you're in that character area in the national landscape.
Okay. So, but all I need from you is for you to accept that you understand that that's what he's done. He's looking at those parts of its setting which you can see in figure 5. And that's right.
I understand what he's done, but he's incorrectly assessed it because it's not from public areas. So you're not going to see this at all.
Right. So, but again, I appreciate your view in answer to the inspector's question previously is that if it's not visible, you don't take it into account as character. So I suppose that's what you're saying. It's not visible, therefore he's taken the wrong approach. Basically,
when you're looking at a proposal, you have to assess what impact it's going to have on the landscape. And you don't do that from private views. You do it from the areas where it's going to affect.
So
in terms of the national landscape.
So I just
So
want to.
it's the views from Hascombe Hills.
Right, okay, so your reason for saying he's taken the wrong approach in 3.14 is because he's looking at a view which is taken from the wrong place, is that?
Yeah,
That, okay.
yeah.
Okay. And then finally then, in respect of section 3, if you turn the page over onto page 18 of 36, do you see there at 3.16, Mr. Dudley has summarised the overall strategy for the wooded low-wheeled landscape type in 3.16? Do you have that?
Hang on. It says the overall strategy for the wooded low-wheeled landscape type is as follows, and then sets out the landscape strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so in terms of what the landscape strategy is, what identified as being the strategic approach is to conserve its areas of intimate, peaceful landscape, and primarily through protection of woodland, hedgerows, hedgerow trees, along with limiting the spread of settlements and other development. So this particular landscape type, the identified strategy is to limit the spread of settlements and other development, isn't it?
It doesn't say stop the spread of settlements, it's limiting it.
Yeah. And conserving
And
intimate, peaceful landscape.
oh, yes, that's part of the sentence, and woodland, hedgerows and hedgerow trees. And what can come about by appeal proposals is the enhancement of that by planting hedgerows and hedgerow trees.
So you and Mr. Dudley will obviously form a different view as to what the situation is in relation to that paragraph, but you both agree that that's an important consideration, whether or not obviously development complies with the overall strategy within the landscape character assessment itself. That's something which is important to consider, isn't it? When
Yes, I
deciding whether
accept
to
that.
grant permission. All right. Just bear with me one moment. I think I've finished that topic. So, Mr. Woods, I want to move on to the next topic, which is the landscape effects as you see them. We've looked at what Mr. Dudley has done, and we've talked about already one of your points, which is the presence of Lydia Park and the effect of that. So you talk about that in 9.6. I'm not going to go over that again. But I recognise that's one of the points you've raised, and we've talked about that already. So I want to concentrate on the other point you make, which is the recent appeal decision at Goring in Oxfordshire. So can you just turn up your appendices CD 7A.2 so we can have a look at that decision, please? You've probably got this printed somewhere else, but I'm just looking in your appendix, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What was the appendix number?
It's CD 7A.2.
It's Appendix 4.
Appendix 4, yeah. And this is really going to the point that you make within your evidence at paragraph 7 about caravan sites and whether they're appropriate or not in the countryside. And at 37 on page 8, we've got the paragraph from this decision upon which you rely. So can you just turn to page 8 and paragraph 37, please?
Yes.
And I want to look at the part of that paragraph that your learned counsel, Mr. Cottle, took you to in his examination in chief. And I'm looking in particular at this bit where it says, in this regard, living in caravans, including in rural areas, is a fundamentally intrinsic part of their culture and lifestyle. Do you remember when he asked you about that in chief?
Yes.
Yep. In terms of whether or not living in caravans is a fundamentally intrinsic part of culture and lifestyle, what you then need to go on and consider is whether or not in this location caravans will cause harm, don't you? And I think you would accept that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to take this paragraph in its whole, and it's the point was the council are arguing what you're arguing is that static caravans shouldn't be there, and that don't respect the local distinctive character and vernacular of the area, which was in the national landscape. But the inspector found, not just because it was part of someone's culture to live there, but the mobile home wouldn't be that intrusive in terms of the landscape.
But the point is, absolutely, what you need to do, as you remind us, is to look at the facts of a particular case, and the judgment the inspector needs to form is, in this case, whether or not the caravans proposed would be harmful. And you say they would be harmful to a degree, but Mr. Dudley takes a different view as to the degree of harm. But whatever that harm is, that's the question he's looking at, isn't it? Whether they would be harmful. Yeah.
Well, the level of harm, and then you've got to balance whether the level of harm is unacceptable or not unacceptable, and you take into account all sorts of matters there, and that goes to the permanent permission, a personal or a temporary.
So we're agreed on that. And I think in respect of Inspector, the next question, I just want to touch on Mr. Wood's position in terms of mitigation, in terms of landscape character, and in particular, Mr. Wood's, in terms of the situation on sites A and B at the moment, Mr. Dudley addresses that within his rebuttal proof of evidence. So can I just ask you to turn up and see what agreement we've got on this, his rebuttal evidence, which is CD 8A.2. And I want you to have a look at page 6 when you've got that.
Okay, so that was the original evidence, yeah?
The rebuttal evidence, sorry. So it's CD 8A.2.
That's the wrong one then.
I've got an unmarked one.
Just be quicker, won't it?
Quickly including, which I haven't.
So the point is just this, that clearly you and Mr. Dudley are agreed that you need to take into account, don't you, the ability of any mitigation to be provided. That's a factor, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And we provided on Appeal B an illustration of what could be provided.
Yeah. And in terms of what Mr. Dudley says at 2.2 and 2.4, he has two reasons expressed there why there's a difficulty with the mitigation. The first of them results in the soil within the area being disturbed and compacted by the displacement, by the placement of hard standing, parking, etc. So he takes a point there about whether or not it would be possible to establish the mitigation, doesn't he?
He does, and I've already said I totally disagree with that.
I understand
because of course you can take up areas of hard standing. It happens all the time. When you get enforcement notice where there's a requirement to remove a hard standing and replant the area, So if that can be done and that works appropriately for the notice, why can't it be done on a planning application that's subject to appeal? There's no reason.
And you recall the photographs that Mr. Dudley took the inspector to within his evidence, the one of the trees having died and the tree having died on PLA. I don't need to ask you to
Maybe
tell
ash
me that.
dieback, I don't know.
But anyway, you recall that element of his examination, and that's why he says it wouldn't be possible to establish the planting. You disagree with that, obviously.
I disagree with that because the reason being is if you put hard standings close to the base of a tree, then it could affect the tree growth, and so you should keep an area that's around from that. So it's taken away from that there, and that would be part of a site development scheme that will be submitted and dealt with by an arboriculturalist.
So the other factor that he identifies at 2.4 is the way in which any landscape that was presented would affect the receiving landscape. And do you see there that he states that the enclosure of an elongated rectangle of land projecting directly towards the AONB boundary would create an artificial landscape form that will be out of keeping with the open field and would in itself result in landscape harm. Now, I appreciate you don't agree with that, but obviously it's correct, isn't it, that if the inspector were to form the view that the landscape, as Mr. Dudley said, would actually harm the landscape treatment, well, that wouldn't be mitigating. That would be an aggravating factor, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but part of the landscape character has been referred to is small fields enclosed by hedgerows.
So the question for the inspector is, looking at the landscape character areas that we've just been through, whether or not he agrees with Mr. Dudley that these enclosures would represent an artificial landscape form, whether he agrees with you that it would read as something which would be expected and not harm the receiving landscape. That's the question, isn't it? I'm deliberately putting it neutrally,
Well,
so as
I think,
not to waste time.
Well, I don't think it's very neutral, but you know, the inspector's got to assess whether a landscaping scheme can be provided will mitigate against any of the limited harm that's been established.
So I mean, the way I put the question was that he needs to consider it, though, in the context of the landscape character appraisals that we've just been through. They're relevant not just to establishing impact and sensitivity, etc., and the baseline. They're also relevant when one's looking at mitigation, aren't they?
Well, I've already said that, as it says in the landscape assessment that you took me through in great detail, that hedgerows and splitting up and small fields are part of the characteristic of the area. So we're proposing something that's characteristic of the area, but now that's the wrong thing to do. So you're saying that because it's just a device to oppose Appeal B. Artificial.
Yeah. So I mean, the reason why I put it like that is simply so that we don't waste time disagreeing on what the inspector's got to decide, but we agree on the parameters for his determination. And so my question was very specific, and that is, when you're looking at mitigating factors, you've got to look at the landscape character areas. Your answer, I think, is that you do, but you don't see that this would be inconsistent with that.
I don't.
That's right, isn't it?
In fact, I think it will be an enhancement because it's an open field at the moment. Take away the development that's on there, that is fairly nondescript, and actually by adding hedgerows and trees, you're going to improve that landscape.
So do you recognise the difference in landscape terms between a landscape that's predicated upon a geometric form of landscape and one which is irregular? Do you recognise the distinction between the two, or do you just view, well, a hedge is a hedge wherever it may be? Do you see that as being a distinction?
I'm not quite sure I understand
distinction
what
between
you're saying.
Geometric and regular.
It's commonplace for proposals in the countryside, Gypsy and Traveller proposals in particular, and I'm sure it will be for settled community as well, to have hedgerows planted. I was on the train coming over to the inquiry today, and I passed housing developments that were originally in fields that had hedgerows planted around them. It's good practice. So why shouldn't that be for this?
I
No
understand.
reason at all.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm trying to just glean the level of your understanding of the landscape type.
Well, I understand what
So
Mr. Dudley's saying here,
Do you,
and that's it's artificially putting up a obstacle and being as difficult as possible when we're proposing some landscaping, put forward one solution to it. There could be many other solutions that could come forward, and I don't consider that will be incongruous in the landscape when viewed from Dunsfold Road or the Huscombe Hill.
Are you familiar with the terminology relating to asserted fields that have been cleared from original woodland?
No.
Okay. But you understand the term geometric, a sort of formal, regular layout. Have you come across that term before, geometric layout?
I'm not quite sure what you mean in the context of this. There's no woodland on any of the appeal sites.
All right, okay. Inspector, I'm going to leave it there. Yeah. And really, Inspector, in terms of landscape character, there's just one point really that I apologise, it wasn't in my list of points, but it really comes out of the way in which Mr. Woods gave his original evidence, and that's the general point he made, if you recall, that all of the sites have been treated the same. And I think I just need to ask him one question on that, and that is, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Woods, just turning up again Appeal B and having a look at the section on landscape character, which is section 4.
In Mr. Wall's evidence, yeah?
In Mr. Dudley's evidence. Mr.
Well,
Dudley's
I think it's helpful to look at it in Mr. Wall's evidence because it puts them all together.
Well, I would rather look
It
at
would
it
be
in
much
Mr.
quicker.
Dudley's. Well, I think it would be better to look at it in Mr. Dudley's evidence because we've been looking at that page already. So it's page 26 again. And
CD number, please.
okay, so it's CD8B.2.
So CD 8A.2, yes?
8B.2.
8B.
Yeah. Inspector, when the witness gets there, I'm going to ask him to go to page 26, which is the last page we were looking at.
I can't find it, so.
Mr. Cottle, can you assist him?
8BA.6.
8B.2. Or wherever you were looking at Mr. Dudley's evidence previously. I mean, it's the same page.
8A.2. Well, every time I go out of it, I have to go back in again. So I haven't got it set up in a particular box. It's all the core documents, so it takes a bit of time. So is it CDA 8A.2?
No, it's CD8B.2 because it relates to Appeal B.
Ah, right. I can't find it. Read out what you want to read out.
Okay, so Inspector, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just read paragraph 4.31 of the document.
It is in Mr. Wood's evidence at page 44 to 45, which Mr. Woods was asking to be able to refer to. It's
Well,
exactly the same paragraph is set out in Mr. Ward's evidence.
Right, okay. So the paragraph at 4.31 is a summary of landscape effects. And so it's the summary of the effects on each one of the receptors Mr. Dudley has identified. And it reads, the landscape effects anticipated to arise from the proposed development are summarised as follows. Overall character of the site, major adverse. Immediate presence of Lydia Park to the south, moderate minor to minor adverse. Wider open field to the north, major adverse. Relationship with Surrey Hills area of outstanding natural beauty, major adverse. Now, when one compares that with appeal site A, and the similar paragraph there at 4.30, the first two of those receptors are the same. But in respect of 3 and 4, the receptors, the wider open field to the north, and the relationship with the Surrey Hills area of outstanding natural beauty, instead of major adverse, Mr. Dudley has assessed that as major moderate adverse.
Couldn't bring himself to say moderate, could he?
And that's because of the different circumstances relating to appeal site A, isn't it?
But I think that's, it's wrong in terms of the assessment, bearing in mind he said appeal site A, it was only during winter months, but he's put major moderate. Should have put moderate.
This is landscape character, landscape effects. And in respect of the reason for the difference, it's because the magnitude is different because the site is different. So he has assessed each site individually, hasn't he?
He's assessed each site individually, I suppose, because he's got different tables, but actually the differences from are marginal and quite clearly on site A, as I said, he couldn't bring himself to say that it was moderate adverse, even though in his evidence that's effectively what he was saying. So, and then other ones are taken as more as the same.
Now, in terms of visual environment, in respect, that's my last topic. I just want to ask one or few questions about that. And again, I'll be confining my questions to matters of approach rather than judgment.
Matters of
Approach. Yeah. So now, when you were taken to this morning by your advocate, you were taken to CD 8B.2, which is where Mr. Dudley's proof is. Can you just try again to find that? Because I need to take you to pages 28, 29 and 30 that you went through with my learned friend earlier.
Mr. Lintop, does anybody in your team have a clean copy?
Well, I was about to ask that. I would give him
For some
mine,
reason,
but it's a glitch on the computer, I think.
all I'm getting is one.
Of Mr. Dudley's? Dudley B.
All I can get up is the core documents related to A. Oh, no.
We've got copies for the members of the public.
Oh yeah, take one of those.
Is it relating to B?
Yes.
Mr. Ward, if you,
Okay.
you know if
B
there's
now.
members.
Don't worry, we get here. No, I've got the things here as well.
Oh, you've got it now.
I've got things here, but I've got, let's. Too many people trying to help.
And you've been on the stand for a long time, so I do appreciate that.
So, CD. Right. CD 8B.
Point 2.
Point 2. Got it. Okay.
Okay, so and it's page 28, which is the page you were looking at underneath figure 7 with my learned friend this morning.
Nearly there. Okay, starts at figure 7.
That's it, you've got it. So in terms of, and I want to just remind you in terms of the purple book, when we're looking at landscape views, we're looking at combining essentially two main elements, the sensitivity of the landscape and the magnitude of the change. And the essential, I just want you to have a look with me at 5.8. And you see there that at paragraph 5.8, Mr. Dudley is assessing sensitivity and he's put that as
Yes.
being very high. And that's pretty obvious because it's a nationally
Of
important
course,
landscape.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next paragraph, 5.9, he's looking at the magnitude of change on the receptor. And he said that that's low.
Hmm.
So it may be that there's not so much between the two of you in actual fact when you look at the assessment and how you look at the various factors. It doesn't have to be, well, it can be a very small change, but if the sensitivity is high, when you combine those factors, you still come up with a significant result.
Well,
Do you see that in terms of
I
significance?
see what you're saying, high sensitivity, but actually the change is low. And then Mr. Dudley puts it down as major moderate, and I think that's the wrong approach. It should be moderate if it's going to be anything. I say it's less than that because it's hardly visible.
Okay, but you understand as a matter of approach,
I understand
that's the way it's done.
as a matter of approach,
And the inspector
but
will need a
you
formal
need
view.
to, well, you need to look at what the actual impact is viewed from that receptor.
So I mean, I've written down that you've said that you would describe it more as moderate, given what you've said
Well,
there, but you haven't
no,
got an assessment of
No,
that.
I didn't know.
Well, he did say that. Actually.
What I said,
Alan,
Mr. Masters, let Mr. Wood's quite capable of maintaining his position.
what I said was I think Mr. Dudley's got that wrong in terms of the way he's looking at it. It should be, swallow it and put down as moderate. I'm saying it's low.
what's low?
The impact.
The magnitude of impact or the
Yeah.
significance of impact. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah, I think you need to look at what is the resulting adverse impact, and the resultant adverse impact, in my opinion, is low.
Why?
Oh,
Why?
because it's plain as the nose on your face.
Not because we can see any transparent assessment from you.
Mr.
Well, we
Woods,
don't
to reach your overall view, how are you combining factors such as sensitivity and magnitude?
I accept
Do you have a
that it's-
framework for doing that?
Yeah, I accept it's high sensitivity because it's in the national landscape. I totally get that. But then you're standing there, and what is the level of magnitude in terms of change? What will the level of impact be from there? And I think if you were walking along there, you wouldn't notice any difference.
Well, you've got
at all.
two sets of factors. What I want to understand is how you relate one to another.
I understand it's very high sensitivity. I get that. But I can't accept that the magnitude of the individual developments that are proposed, either on their own or cumulatively, would have a major to moderate impact.
The magnitude is said it would be low. It's a question of how these different judgments relate one to the other. And
Well, Mr. Dudley, Mr. Dudley accepts that the magnitude of change upon the receptor would be low.
yes.
I think it would be very low. It's
And
very little
are you using
change.
some sort of framework so that you've got one set of judgments which you read against another?
If there was nothing there, sir, let's just take the point that if you were looking across there, and from that highly sensitive receptor, and you were looking across, and there was one mobile home proposed, and you could see that one mobile home that has a greater impact. What you're seeing is a series of mobile homes that are there, and you will have a couple of additional mobile homes.
Yeah.
And so that's why the actual adverse impacts must be very low.
Inspector, in the light of that, I would just ask one further question, and that is on the next page, page 29. And you'll see there that we're looking at a different viewpoint, the viewpoint from 277. And again, in respect of paragraph 5.12, you and Mr. Dudley agreed that we're dealing with a very high sensitivity receptor. The question really is about how you combine that with the magnitude of change to assess the significance of any impact upon the receptor. Now, what you said just now was that part of what affected your previous view was that you would see mobile homes already or caravans already, and you would see more of them. So therefore you thought that was a very low rather than the low magnitude of change. In respect of this viewpoint, if it's right that the development would be development whereby you're looking at homes where you wouldn't see them before, as Mr. Dudley indicated, you would just see the new homes, then that would have a larger change upon the receptor, wouldn't it? And that's why he said it's medium. So could you agree that as a matter of principle arriving
Well, I
at
can't
what
see
you
the
just
mobile
said?
homes there.
No, so I put it as a point of principle. Would you agree that if you can't see anything by way of mobile homes with the existing position,
Yep.
and you introduce some new ones, that's obviously more of a change, isn't it?
I would accept that if that's the case.
Okay. Inspector, there are a number of viewpoints, but I will leave it to you to view those. I think I've used up my time in terms of cross-examination, and I will just check with my witness to see I've covered everything, but I think I'm there. Thank you very much, Mr. Woods.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Sullivan, do you want to put any questions to Mr. Woods? If you do, you just need to come forward to a microphone. No, that's fine. As long as you can get, you need a microphone so that the streaming can pick you up.
Mm.
I'll press the button. Yes, well, as some of you may know that I'm Councillor Sullivan, Hascombe Parish Council. The question that I would like to ask Mr. Woods regarding landscape, the landscape that you will be within, we've been looking at area B, which is your baby, and Mr. Dudley showed a picture looking from the site back onto the area of outstanding
All
natural
right. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
beauty, which is now the Surrey Hills National Landscape. Are you saying that section 245 of the levelling up does not count in this instance?
In what regard, please?
That before the site was there, when you had trees, a hedge and a ditch from that viewpoint, you would not, when you look back through the site, are you saying that the site now doesn't have a gap? And I'm not very good at putting words together because it's taken me slightly by surprise that you've asked me to talk. What I'm saying is the view isn't, we've all been talking about the view, you've been talking about the view looking from the Surrey Hills National Landscape, and we're talking now about the view looking into the Surrey Hills National Landscape.
Hmm.
If you put that site there, B, C, D, A, you then, we've been talking 160 metres away from the boundary line. In your point of view, in your points, are you saying it doesn't count?
Well, obviously, so there is a submission on whether or not the proposed development affects the setting and whether or not section 85 is engaged for development within the national landscape.
Yes, I'm happy for Mr. Woods to answer the question.
Yeah, what I said was when that photograph was shown, that's an internal photograph from the road that you, any other members of the public wouldn't see because it's on private land. And I said it was unrepresentative of, I understand when you're viewing from a national landscape, of course you want to, if you're walking, you want to take in the views, everything like that, and you look at that impact. And the impact, I say, will be minimal. When you're distance away, you would hardly notice what's there. And you say about trees and hedgerows, it's already been established that relating to Appeal B, because I think that's what was referred to about trees and hedgerows being taken down, nothing to do with the appellant. And so he shouldn't be whipped with the birch on the basis that what someone else did, nothing to do with him at all. And what he's actually proposing to do as part of a landscaping scheme, which will have to come in as a conditions application, is to plant hedgerows and trees. So that must be a good point.
Okay, thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Anything else you wanted to ask, Councillor, or is just that point? It doesn't. You don't have to ask any more questions. I just want to make sure you've had the opportunity to ask what you want.
Thank you. That was a question I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Mr. Woods,
Sure.
I'd just like to ask you a couple of things, please. Just thinking of what you've said about Lydia Park. And bearing in mind what you said about it, I think probably not your words, but being a major component of the character of the area.
Mm.
Are you saying in effect that any proposal for a Gypsy and Traveller site adjacent to Lydia Park couldn't have an adverse effect on the character of the landscape?
No, I'm not saying that at all, sir. No, any such proposal will have an impact, but what I say is that impact is very low.
In any case,
Well, I haven't got other cases before me, but what in terms of the appeals that are before you, I consider for my clients that the impact will be very low. It doesn't mean to say that the impact on a unknown application.
oh right, that's what I wanted to be
No,
clear
no,
on.
because we don't know what that unknown application would be.
Okay. And just wanted to ask you about the national landscape. I'm looking at a plan which is in Mr. Ward's appendices. It's Appendix 13.
What I've done on this plan, sir, which is the route plan, is marked on there the boundaries of the national landscape. So
Oh, you've got.
I've effectively got it on here.
Right.
So,
Okay. Because it comes down from the north towards Dunsfold Road.
yes, and then there's a wedge that goes in the middle. And so
It's
the
essentially-
Stovolds Hill is there. So
It goes up towards
there.
the A Road, doesn't it, to the
Yeah.
east, and then sweeps west around the
Yeah,
airfield.
correct. Yeah.
But if we look at this southern boundary, this part of the national landscape,
Mm.
do you have a view as to where its setting might extend?
Well, I think in terms of the setting of the natural landscape, it will be close to it.
Close to
but I
what?
think,
Close to what?
sorry, the boundary of the national landscape. So if you're talking about the
B-
setting,
The B road,
yeah, if you're looking at the setting of the national landscape,
yes.
then it's an area that will be close to it, because it will make a nonsense of the natural landscape if you, oh, well, it's going to extend on that area there, because you could have a proposal that was 300 metres away. And the council might be saying, well, actually, that affects the setting. So it's an arbitrary figure. So, oh, well, it's 160 metres, so that's within the setting of the national landscape. I don't accept that.
Do you accept that there is a setting
Yes, I do.
beyond the boundary?
Beyond the boundary, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Woods. Mr. Cottle, do you wish to re-examine?
Well, I do, but I would like to have a word with my own friend, Mr. Masters, before I do,
Is this,
in order to assist matters.
so that we, yeah, expedite matters.
That's right.
Well, it's a little bit early, but certainly your point is useful, Mr. Cottle. Yes, I'd appreciate that. If things can be expedited in re-examination. 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, we'll adjourn and back, please, at past.
So.
Mr. Lintott, did you see the other advocates on their way? W- If you can, yeah, see them, cheer them up, or perhaps somebody from your team. I do want, I'll meet, they're here. Yeah. Okay, good. It's exactly 3:30. Time to resume. Mr. Cottle, have you managed to
Yes.
make progress?
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reserve the points that I could have introduced in re-examination to submissions as a result of the discussion with my learned friend. And there's only one question that I want to put to Mr. Woods. And I don't know whether it's possible to get out again the document that you were just looking at with figure 8 on it, which is the proof of Mr. Nicholson.
Mr. Dudley?
Mr. Dudley, yeah.
Mr. Dudley, sorry. So Nicholson is firm.
Yeah. Right, so
I'm looking at Nicholson in front of me.
figure 8.
And it's the same document. I was just asking Mr. Woods to find the document.
It's been appeal A, is it?
Appeal B,
Appeal
actually.
B, sorry. So it's CD 8B.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
And if you could open that document. And go to page 17, paragraph 3.14.
Three 3.14, yes.
That's
Okay.
right. And if I could ask you to look at the second line, and there's a comma, and then the words follow, with those considered to be reflective of the site. You see that?
I do, yes.
And then there's the word and its setting. Now, if you look at 314, it sets out the characteristics of the Pinks Hill to Park Hatch Wooded Low Wheeled WW4,
Yes.
which is the area of land the other side of the Dunsfold Road comprising the national landscape.
Yes.
And then we find at paragraph 315 that based upon the above analysis, the land to the north, and this is where Mr. Dudley and I were disagreeing because he was accusing me of wasting inquiry time, but I was trying to make the point that what he was saying in relation to 314 and 315 is that the characteristics of Pink Hill to Park Hatch Wooded Low Wheeled are reflected by the Pink Hill to Park Hatch Wooded Low Wheeled. That's as much as he's saying, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But then if we go back to 314,
Yes.
said to be reflective of the site and its setting. And the question that I fell out with Mr. Dudley is whether the site actually reflects anything, because he was saying, no, you're misreading it. I'm talking about the land to the north. I'm not talking about the site. Is there anything about the appeal site that reflects anything of the area to the other side of the Dunsfield Road?
No, it's just a ordinary field.
And if you go to that figure 8 that we were looking at, which is a bit further into the proof, it's at paragraph 511.
Be there shortly.
Page 28. Next one.
Figure 7,
Next one. There we are.
figure 8, yeah.
So, is a person's experience here going to be adversely affected or not adversely affected? Their experience of the national landscape, their experience of the local landscape at that juncture.
Is this
No,
the figure 8?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe it is, no.
So is the site within the setting of that?
Well, as I said, no.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Woods, you were asked, just a couple of questions. You were asked in that long debate with my learned friend about the weight that should be given to the AGLV in relationship to the ANOB. Do you remember?
I do, yes.
And you were taken, I think, to policy RE3.
Yes,
Have you got a copy of policy RE3? And if you have, I'd like you to look at the guidance notes at 1335. I think you were taken to 1337.
yeah. Need to get the dog game over.
Yeah, no, I'm
first,
just
yeah.
explaining to the
Yeah,
inspector
yeah.
more than to you.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
$13.37 I was taken to, yes.
Yeah, could you go to 1335?
Yes, that's what I refer to. but
About
yeah.
halfway down, however, as a local designation.
Yes,
Is that statement there consistent or not consistent with your view that one has to, that it holds less weight?
it's consistent with my view that it holds less weight. Because that's what it says.
And is that inconsistent with the actual policy itself, which talks about the same principles for protecting the ANAB will apply to the area of great landscape value? Does a reference to principles equate to a reference to weight?
Yeah, and there's some tension between the policy and the intention of the policy.
Thank you. So let's look at, on this issue, if we can, the framework. Now, does the framework require the local plan policies must be interpreted consistent with it?
Yes,
And is it a duty of the inspector if he considers that the local plan policy, if it equated the same weight and approach to national landscape, AGLV, to interpret whether that's consistent with national policy?
yes, it would be for the inspector to interpret that and consider that in terms of the framework, what the framework says, and what the intention behind that policy. Clearly, AGLV must carry less weight than a national landscape.
So let's look at 187 of the MPPF. A deals with valued landscapes,
Yes,
doesn't it? Then let's go to 188. Is there a hierarchy of weight to be given to things? One needs carefully to distinguish between them. 188.
yes. I mean, well, there should be between hierarchy between international, national, and locally designated sites. So yes, nationally designated would be the national landscape, whereas locally would be the AGLV.
So does the framework intend there to be a distinction between them?
Yes,
Not only in terms of identification, but in terms of weight that should be given to them?
yes, it does. Yeah.
And we could look at 189.
Yes.
And if I could ask you to read the first two sentences, or is it one?
Yeah. Great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing landscaping, scenic beauty in national parks, the Broads national landscapes, which have the highest status of protection in relation to these issues.
Now, is it a mistake that that doesn't include the AGLVs? Or was that intentional on behalf of government?
No, that's intentional because AGLV is just a local landscape designation.
So would it be appropriate to give the same weight as is considered in 189 to an ANOB to an AGLV?
No, definitely not.
And if, as Mr. What's his name now? Dudley. Thank you, Mr. Dudley. I was trying to think of the Duke of Essex. He was Dudley, wasn't he?
Elizabethan.
Elizabethan. Yes, he was. Sorry, just in the site, so because we'll discuss it later. Well, we will do. Anyway, but with that twirl at the back, it always keeps reminding me of that. But anyway, so sorry, it's true. So when Mr. Dudley was making the point, a number of times, that was the correct approach to give it the same weight. Is that right in terms of national policy?
No, it's not.
No further questions. Sorry for that slight aside, Mr. Dudley. I hope I didn't offend you.
Thank you, Mr. Woods.
Thank you, sir.
Right, and it's Mr. Rowe next.
Yes. So Mr. Rowe is going to sit where he is, if that's okay.
Well, he's a bit close to you.
Well, I don't smell, I don't think.
Yeah.
Would you like?
That's better, yeah. It's always better to have some space between the applicant.
Mr. Rowe, could you just read the first page of your proof of evidence, particularly your experience and qualifications and background, please?
My name is Phil Rowe of Pro Planning Solutions Limited. I hold a BA Honours degree in Town and Country Planning obtained in 1993 and a further Bachelor of Town Planning in 1994. From 1994 to date, I have been continually employed in relation to town planning positions, having worked in a variety of urban and rural councils, including Waverley Council, in planning enforcement positions until 2007, and subsequently as a self-employed planning consultant.
Now, with your permission, sir, I'm going to take the proof as read.
That's fine, Mr. Dawson. That will no doubt help.
Yes. Now, Mr. Rowe, you represent the residents of plots C and D.
That's correct.
I wonder if you could just update the inspector. I think he already knows, but I think for the record, the position in relation to any enforcement notices in relation to those sites.
Yes, sir. You may have heard from the council's supplementary statement. Enforcement notice has been served on plots C and D, which are the appellants here today. And they've also been served on the two plots immediately to the south. So that's B and A.
But not the same B and A, sir, as in this case. The entire.
Yeah, that's not to refer to that place.
In that case, 4, 3, 2, 1, if that's easier.
Yes.
Correct. So those notices were served on 22nd of April 2025, taking effect on 30th of May 2025.
Okay. As a matter of a record, sorry, I think I interrupted you. Carry on.
And I can confirm we have lodged appeals against those enforcement notices.
As a matter of record, have any enforcement proceedings been served on what we've identified in this case as plots A and B? To your knowledge?
So
The A and B in this case, yes.
A and B in this case, if that's Mr. Wood's clients, I understand no enforcement notices have been served.
Have any operational development allegations been made about raising land or removing ditches?
No, they haven't.
Thank you. Now, it's been a long, hard couple of days, and Mr. Woods has been the trailblazer for both examination in chief and cross-examination for over 3 hours today. Well over the time limit, I think, that was had. Relating to the planning implications of the development, and although those planning implications were in reference to plots A and B, would you say that the same arguments are relevant to plots C and D?
Yes.
And in the context of Mr. Wood's position and indeed arguments, is there anything you would disagree with, or generally do you support the case put forward on those matters? Or is there anything specific you want to add?
Yeah, I've listened carefully throughout. I've been present throughout the duration. As you'll have seen, sir, there's nothing I disagree with. Whilst Mr. Woods and myself haven't got landscape qualifications, I agree that that's a reasonable approach to take. The only thing that I would add that's not been covered on that particular point is when you look at the glossary in the National Planning Policy Framework, which may be useful to turn up. I think it's further purposeful that valued landscapes aren't defined in the glossary, but further purposefully, I would say that sorry, let me get the wording right. National landscapes are defined. So national landscapes are defined as areas legally designated as area of outstanding natural beauty under the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act and Countryside and Rights of Way Act. So that there's nothing under the glossary definition of national landscapes that refers to areas of great landscape value. So I think that's purposeful, and I think it's further purposeful, particularly when you look at the way other things are defined in the glossary. You know, there's very specific definitions of heritage assets when you're looking at things like that, or non-designated heritage assets. So it's, in my view, it's purposeful that valued landscapes aren't defined. And I think that's because of the distinctions in paragraph 187 to 189 of the framework, where it distinguishes further between local designations and national.
Mr. Rowe, the inspector asked asked Mr. Woods about the setting of the ANOB. I much prefer to call it the ANOB rather than the national landscape, because national landscape can be more than one thing, and I want to be certain about what we're talking about, which is the ANOB. Mr. Woods's answer was the setting is narrowly constrained. Could I ask you this? If it wasn't, do you agree with that?
Yes, I do agree it's narrowly constrained.
if it wasn't narrowly constrained, would the effect, do you think the effect would be to impose constraints and standards beyond where the designation is?
Yes, it would. It's purposefully kept constrained. Can I just elaborate on my answer there, because it may save a lot of inquiry time. I often refer to I think it was the judgment of Lord Reed, where there's a famous reference to, we don't live in the world of Humpty Dumpty, because in local plans there's a lot of mutually irreconcilable policies, and in any particular decision one must give way to the other, but ultimately it has to come down to common sense. We can't make the development plan mean whatever we want to meet it to mean. So that's the Humpty Dumpty reference that I regularly find amusing. But yeah, it's matters of exercise of judgment. Now, obviously, we've seen that even within the local plan RE3 policy, that there are differences between the supporting text and the wording itself, that there's conflict. So I think, it's a professional judgment to be made. A landscape consultant may come to one judgment, a planning consultant may come to another. But that's the world we live in with planning, that it's exercises of judgment rather than total scrutiny on occasion as to what words say, particularly if they contradict each other.
Now, if the setting were to spread as far as Stovolds Aerodrome, and it suggested that the same level of constraint applied to the setting as applied to the ANOB itself, would the 1,800 or so houses that have been given planning permission there have likely been given planning permission judged on the standard of their effect on the setting?
Again, it's a planning judgment. Obviously, each application is dealt with on its own individual merits. My understanding of the status of the Stovolds Aerodrome permission is that it was granted outline permission. My understanding is it's for about 1,800 houses. My further understanding is I don't think any gypsy pitches were permitted as part of it. But in terms of answering the question, it would have been part of the setting wider setting consideration.
Now, with that, what we know is if one drew a circle around the ANOB to include Dunsfold, would it include other areas of settlement?
So I understand the question. You're saying if you drew a circle around, including Dunsfold, would it include other areas of settlement?
Yeah. A big circle around.
Yeah, it would include obviously Lydia Park as the settlement, but I'm not sure whether it would include any land within settlement boundaries, because we're in the rural area. But it would include, the Lydia Park settlement.
Would it include fracking sites?
Yes.
Would it include sewage works?
It should do, yes. I can't think of it where any sewage works are. But
how logically would it be, therefore, to extend the setting that far?
Well, certainly if you're looking from long distance viewpoints as to what you could see within the range of visibility from any particular long distance viewpoints, yes, that would be part of the setting. Maybe to assist the inspector in layman's terms, as a planning consultant rather than a landscape specialist, I always think you can't look at the character of the area, so landscape character, without considering the context. Now, whether that's what the brown or the red book says, that's a reasonable judgment. That's what I adopt in terms of exercise of judgment.
So they're going to ask you the same question that the inspector asked Mr. Woods. Where would this, how far from the boundary, which we know is the Stovolds Road, the nearest boundary, would you say any setting extended?
Well, I think it's within field of vision. Often when I'm searching planning histories, I will put in a postcode, which in the rural area is typically throws up a wide area of search as to what's been permitted within the same postcode, what hasn't. And in this instance, that's what threw up the thatched house farm decision, because it was within the same setting, context, circle, field of vision, whichever way you want to look at it. That seemed to be a reasonable approach to take. Again, it's a judgment rather than something that, from a planning consultant point of view, that it's not defined. It's taking a rational approach.
And I now want to turn really to some of the evidence given by Mr. Dudley that you're likely to be cross-examined on. Because you're likely to be cross-examined on, I want to understand in chief what you're going to say. But I know this, I might be stopped on this, but so I'm going to ask you just about baseline. I don't want to go through the details of the baseline, but do you agree with Mr. Dudley's assessment of baseline?
No, I disagree.
Do you agree with the elements of Mr. Wood's assessment of baseline that he's identified, including those elements such as the Lydia Park itself, the brewery site, the fracking site, etc.?
Yeah, no, I think when you're exercising a judgment, that's a much more sensible approach to take. I'm much more weighted in favour of Mr. Woods's analysis than I am of Mr. Dudley's.
Is there anything you want to add?
Well, particularly when you look at baselines, I understand what Mr. Dudley said in terms of his consideration of, what is it called, hatched farm, thatched house.
The brewery.
The thatched house and the brewery. I agree that without scrutinising that decision, that I think Mr. Dudley's failed to do, they just look like agricultural buildings.
Can I just stop you there?
Can I
Sorry, Karen.
I'm just waiting for the inspector to make a note. Okay, thank you. And now you've obviously obtained a copy of the officer report rather than just the extracts, you've got the full picture of the size, scale, position, siting of those, which are industrial buildings. They're not agricultural. They have an agricultural appearance. They're described as simplistic metal profile buildings. I think rationally, that's how I would describe mobile homes: simplistic form, metal profile buildings, or structures to be precise, rather than buildings, because they're mobile, they're movable.
Were you surprised with Mr. Dudley's answer, but you couldn't see any of them from the site?
I've looked and I've zoomed in to the photos from the vantage points from the different footpaths. I understand as a landscape consultant, the onus is to explain whether they were zoomed images or natural, what particular camera you took. And I'm assured they're just a natural view. Even zooming in on them on my computer, I'm struggling to see the basic point that's being made as to whether anything is visible. I understand Mr. Dudley, when you look at the landscape guidance. So is it the red book, brown book? I'm not familiar.
When you say you're struggling to see anything, are you referring to the caravan sites now?
I'm struggling to see our site in any way distinct from Lydia Park.
The reason why the inspector paused there is because you didn't actually answer the question I put to you. So I was going to come back to you because I asked you a slightly different
Go on.
question. But I'll come back to my question. Now we're on, because I was going to, well, can we park views for a second? Because I'm going to come back to views briefly. But can I go back to the question? Well, you may remember that I cross-examined Mr. Dudley about what you could see from Peel site C and D, and he said I never saw the industrial buildings or any of them. And were you surprised by that answer?
From C and D?
Yes.
So standing at C and D, looking towards Thatched House?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely surprised, as the inspector will see on his site visit. From C and D, you can see those industrial buildings, those brewery buildings very clearly.
Can you see the A and AB in the same context?
So if you're standing at C and D appeal site, looking towards the industrial buildings, can you see the AOMB? Yes.
Would you know that you were looking at an A and AB from the appeal side? Or would it just appear some distant countryside?
Without being a planner, I wouldn't know. And being a layman, you wouldn't know. There's nothing distinct. You know, there's no finger post that says you're entering the national park that would make an obvious distinct boundary. No, in simple terms, there's no reason why you'd pick out what the buffer area is and where the AONB boundary starts. The reason I've tried to keep my proof really succinct is I like pictures to tell lots of words. So the aerial photo that I've included on page 1 of my proof seeks to say 1,000 words in terms of highlighting the 3 industrial buildings that have been erected on what would have been an open field.
So just pausing you there, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to help. We got the brewery site, we can see the 3 industrial buildings, we can see C and D. And then where that hedgerow is that Dunsfield Road?
Towards the north, or yes, it is.
And so that's the boundary of the A and OB?
Correct. So the Thatched House farm site is immediately adjacent to the boundary of the AONB.
And was there any objection to those buildings going up, or any consideration by the district council on the impact of the setting of the A and OB? So have they acted consistently here with the objection they made?
No, they've not acted consistently. So yeah, I appreciate the inspector asking for the full content of the officer report. The extracts that I took out don't conceal anything. So what I've copied is the full extent of their officers' landscape considerations. And this was a 2022 application. Obviously, they've been very keen and they've put the permitted, I say industrial buildings. I can understand why Mr. Dudley, without scrutinising the permission, says they look like agricultural type buildings. But the part that I've highlighted in green from the officer report, second paragraph down on page 3 of my proof, confirms officers are satisfied that the design, appearance and size of the proposed buildings would not cause material harm to the wider countryside and would not appear materially different to agricultural buildings. Now, my points in the comments, just if you've not dealt with my proofs before, I like to keep them succinct, use photos, look at how the council's determined things and add analogous comments in terms of what we're dealing with. So my comments there are TD1, design didn't feature as a reason for refusal. It's common ground that the proposed development is of high quality because of absence of referral to TD1 in a reason for refusal.
You're talking about this development?
Yes, I'm making an analogy between how the officer in recent decision has determined something in the same postcode, same solely AGLV, and notwithstanding that was closer to the AONB boundary, notwithstanding that it was similarly in an open field.
Can I?
I make the comparison that similarly we would, adopting that approach, we would not cause material harm to the wider countryside either. Now, the only thing I'd caveat on that is a planning condition was put on those industrial buildings in terms of tree planting. Now, those trees were planted to the north of the 3 buildings, because you look at those buildings end on from, so whilst it wasn't referred to in terms of any effects on the area of outstanding natural beauty, any glimpses of those buildings would be end on, so you'd be looking at the northern end of those buildings. That's where tree planting condition has gone on to soften, filter. As a planning consultant or dealing with an application, that's why I'd suggest it was sensible. Indeed, that's what that officer did. Now, we can adopt the same approach in terms of D and C, because you're looking from a higher vantage point down onto the end of our site, the thin end of it, rather than the long part. So the northern end, we've got room to adopt a similar strategy. So if the inspector's not persuaded about the hedgerow type arguments, or the inspector favours Mr. Dudley's point that it could look, what was the word, out of kilter in terms of just putting a hedge around an individual plot. Yeah, adopting a similar strategy to thatched house, farm, trees would deal with the same point. Now, obviously, the planning officer has borne in mind there that landscaping takes time to develop, but a similar approach would be to have a native trees at the far end of Mark Doherty's plot, which is D or 4, whichever way we look at it. Are you clear as to my answer, sir? That the northernmost of the 2 plots are my appellants.
And would there be,
Sorry, Mr. Master, I just want some clarity. I just want to understand what Mr. Rowe's saying on page 3, which he's just been talking about.
Yep.
The comments in blue, just not quite halfway down, where you're starting policy TD1. Am I right in thinking you said that that was your view about the appeal proposal rather than the brewery buildings?
Well, both, sir. I'm drawing an analogy. I'm drawing a comparison.
So when it says the proposed development is of a high quality and inclusive design, that is a reference to appeals C and D.
That's a reference to the wording of policy TD1.
Well, no, it isn't. It's about development. It's saying the proposed development is of a high quality and inclusive design. I want to know which development you're referring to.
Policy TD1 is the policy that talks about high quality and inclusive design.
Yes.
So,
and then you go on to say the proposed development is of that.
So the thatched house farm met policy TD1.
Right.
Our proposal hasn't been refused with respect to TD1. So it's implicit in that the council didn't have a concern about the design of our buildings.
I want to understand what your view is. Are you saying that the proposed development is of a high quality and inclusive design?
What I'm saying is that mobile homes are simplistic design,
Yes, you've already told us that.
that they're constructed of metal sheeting. Similarly, agricultural buildings dressed up as industrial buildings are a simplistic design. So even though the officer report refers to simplistic design, by reason of absence of reason for refusal against TD1, they've accepted its high quality design. Yeah,
Yeah. So what are you saying in terms of the proposed development? Are you relating that comment about high quality and inclusive design
yes,
to the appeal proposals?
yes, I am. I'm relating it to both proposals. So
Right,
whilst
right, the reason I asked is when Mr. Masters started his questions in chief to you, he asked whether you agreed with the approach of Mr. Woods, and you said you supported what Mr. Woods had said.
generally, yes.
Yes, and Mr. Woods said that although he puts it at a very low level, he said there would be some minor harm from gypsy and traveller sites. And I just want to understand exactly what your position is, because
Well,
you seem to be saying two different things.
Yeah, I'm not talking about levels of harm in this answer. I'm talking about design and a design policy that's not been
Okay.
used as a reason for refusal. So whether can I try and explain myself a bit clearer? So yeah, you wouldn't expect TD1, high quality and inclusive design, to necessarily feature with agricultural style buildings. Therefore, there's no criticism against, from a design point of view, just design, what's been permitted at Thatched House Farm. I think I agree with the planning officer there. That's a very sensible planning permission for rural economic development within the AGLV. Similarly, we're just AGLV here. We're dealing with similarly simplistic metal profile structures. Under the conditions session, we can discuss whether painting them green could make a difference so that they look more like an agricultural poultry shed, or so that but the starting point is it's the same material, it's a simplistic design. When I've dealt with traveller appeals before, sometimes it makes sense to say, yeah, we'll clad them in timber, but yeah.
Three buildings, 4.7 metres in height at the eaves, Mr. Rowe.
Yeah, again,
No, let me just finish. The three buildings, 4.7 metres in height in the eaves, close to the ANAD. Would that cause some harm to the countryside?
It has to be considered against the raft of planning policies. I agree with the planning officer there that it doesn't cause sufficient harm to refuse the proposal. Obviously, if you refer back to the aerial photo, you can see the poaching of the land around the buildings. And I've specifically outlined our site in red, so you can see the comparable size. Well, what I've done in fairness is I've outlined both appeal sites in red. So if anything, it makes our current appeal sites look larger than they are when taken individually. But as a starting point, it was a field at Thatched House Farm. It was a field with our development.
So that's the next question I was going.
Sorry, Inspector, we've got an unattended computer that's making a ringing noise. So yeah, I'm just going to wait till it. No, it's stopped again. So we just check and see. Yeah.
Can I just ensure you've understood my points clearly now with the elaboration? Thank you.
So, if we could, I'll just finish off that by saying to you, if you compare plots C and D and their closeness to Lydia Park and Thatched Cottage Brewery, development in a field, which would you think would be more unacceptable?
Not just in terms of the size of the plots, the size of development, I would have thought the thatched house farm was more unacceptable. In terms of the scale, height, number of built buildings, I would have thought that would be more unacceptable.
Do you think therefore that there has been a consistent approach taken by just comparing those two decisions?
Clearly, it's inconsistent between the council.
Thank you. Pause there. We've asked for a number of occasions, so still haven't got it, for the fracking planning decision, which I had hoped to be able to show you and ask you to comment on. So for the moment, what we know is that the plan permission has been given by the Secretary of State in the next field to the thatched cottage for the fracking. And we know that these are going to be substantially large drilling rigs. Would they have an effect upon the ANOB?
Yeah, in fairness, I can only answer what's peculiar to my knowledge. I don't know the heights of the rigs or the positions. I would declare an interest that I have shares in Angus Oil that I think are part of the fracking developers, but I'm unfamiliar with the extent of their proposals there.
If you don't know, Mr. O, you don't know.
You will always find my evidence. I will only answer on what I'm sure of and what I know.
Yes, sir. So could I just ask by you that we have that information as soon as possible?
I must admit, I wasn't aware that it had been specifically asked for. I knew there'd been reference to the fracking proposal.
And you made a point of saying so you'd like to see it.
I'd like to see the size as part of my site visits. Did I?
My understanding, sir, is I don't think there's anything on site currently, but it is
No, but I want to see the position that's been talked about.
So I'd like to see that as well, but I'm unfamiliar currently.
I thought so. We had this discussion, and that you did indicate that you'd like to see the planning documents.
My understanding is that Waverley Borough Council opposed it, and presumably they've got an officer's report that went to committee setting out its reasons as to why they thought it was substantially adversely affecting the national landscape.
Or it may have been on vehicle movements, but yeah, clearly it's been refused to get to the
But I think
level and
the important
duration it's
thing
gone.
is to have the Secretary of State's decision overruling them, because I think that's significant to the decisions you have to make for you. It's a very recent decision.
If it's,
It's plainly not something this witness can help us with. I
No.
mean, I recall you saying you wanted to see the site. I mean, I
Yes.
must say, it's not something that I have any instructions on or knew anything about. I don't think it's something that you knew about before we started.
no,
either.
it isn't.
No,
But-
I'm unaware. It may be matters for closing rather than myself to
Presumably the
comment.
council can just get a copy of the decision.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if that's something
Yeah.
that would help.
I think the decision and the proposed plans will assist us all.
Whereas these are documents that I would ask you to have. It would be unfair in my view if you didn't have them, bearing in mind the arguments Mr. Dudley has put forward.
I'm familiar with the not dissimilar proposal in Brockham Betchworth and its effect on Box Hill, which
Well,
is
no.
AOMB, but I can't comment further
No, we're
than
not
that.
going on.
No,
into
let's
that.
just not go there anymore. We'll leave it and hope that.
Is that
they'll-
it, Mr. Master?
No, not quite, sir, but.
We're nearly there.
Yes, sorry, I'm not going to be long, promise you. I did say, so I wanted to go to, Mr. Rowe's views, the view of, Mr. Dudley's assessment of views,
Other views, yes.
and then I was going to stop.
Right.
Um,
So we're into Mr. Dudley's.
well,
Evidence.
yes, sir, but I was going to try and paraphrase it rather than spending lots of time. If we just pick up, I think it's the viewpoints, which is, I think, is exhibit
The
13.
plan, yeah.
Where we can see this, and we know that in respect of all the viewpoints, well, at least, I'm not sure whether he gave value for Dunsfold Road, but for the other three viewpoints, there was substantial harm, effectively. I wonder if you'd like to comment on your view as to whether or not you agree with that, or not.
Just for my clarity, the way Mr. Dudley's dealt with appeals C and D, it's the same level of harm for each one? There's no distinction between each one?
There isn't.
So
You can't, yeah,
Sorry, sir.
you can't start a
no,
discussion
it was
like this.
just to
Mr.
save
Rowe.
cross-examination questions later. So I'm looking at appeals C and the comments that have been made in that regard. So it's saying Mr. Dudley's visual appraisal, users of public footpath, Hascombe 279. So the photograph view from that point, he's got major, moderate, adverse. Major adverse from Bramley footpath 277, and users of Dunsfold, major, moderate, adverse. That's what you're asking me to comment on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And remember, this was the area I paused. I said I'd come back to you because that's where you were describing that you'd zoomed in and you couldn't see anything. So if you could go back to your answer.
Yes,
I expect to interrupt you because he wasn't certain whether you were talking about the brewery sites or the actual or our sites. Do you remember? So that's where we were a little while ago.
So my response was in terms of the photos that are included within the original proof and the supplementary proof giving the winter views. Okay. Now, again, I'm a planning consultant rather than a landscape consultant. When I dealt with planning applications, when I submit applications, you consider that the length of footpaths in the vicinity, you consider the number of viewpoints along the footpath. Now, from Mr. Dudley's evidence, he's explained that his photos represent the worst of those views along the footpath. Now, it would be interesting to walk those footpaths with you, sir. I assume we're going to do it all accompanied because I don't know if they're from a major stopping point at the peak of a hill where you have the most spectacular views, or whether these photos have been taken just down a hill where it may be possible to, in the winter, see between trees. But I've not made any attempt to set out in my proof whether these are major or moderate. What I would question is major would appear to be the highest level of harm. So if I'm being told these views are major being the highest level of harm, I'm not sure as a professional what level of harm there would be for a supermarket in the middle of a field that was visible from more locations, whether you can have a scale higher than major. To me, in terms of exercise of judgment, as per Lord Reed, I think these are on the totally opposite end of the scale. If this is what we're being told is the worst of the viewpoints, and that the council has to go back to see if they're worse in a winter time, if I can't see the distinction on the photos distinguishing my appeal site the two clients' appeal sites. If I can't discern what's currently on the site from Lydia Park, well, without even zooming in, I can't distinguish on any of the photos that are in evidence. And as a non-landscape architect, I can't quantify how a landscape architect would say that's major adverse. That leaves no room on the scale for something that's bang in your face and
Okay, last question, because I'm going to do this now on biodiversity, because I think it might save time later on, and it goes back to the landscaping.
Sorry, you said
Yeah,
biodiversity?
I did. Bear with
I-
me. It'll save time. Just one question.
Well,
It'll save.
Yeah, but we are on a topic based.
I know, but it goes to landscaping conditions. Just trust me, sir, please. One question, okay? We know that the biodiversity expert has referred to seeing on sites, I think our sites, some aquatic plants. Or is it, sorry, but others. But would there be room on our site to plant species that were helpful to the butterfly species that's said to be quite rare?
yeah, what I've done, so obviously,
I'm sorry, Mr. Masters, talking about plants to support a particular species does relate to the ecology topic.
It
well,
does. sir, but
it's a landscape point in terms of native hedging and the type of species of hedging.
It just
that may
seems
be
more
similar.
convenient to do it now, sir, than recall this witness at some
Okay.
later date to do it. But it's a matter for you. I can recall him, but if that's
Well, I
the
presumed it was going to be Mr. Rowe in any event, an ecology.
it was going to be what, sir, in any way?
I thought it was going to be Mr. Rowe in any event.
Well, yeah, but I'm hoping that if that's the only.
Yeah, I'm no more an ecologist than I am a landscape or
But
a flood
Might
expert.
be, but I won't need to recall him.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, it's one question.
So yeah, is there space to plant native hedging around the perimeter of our site? Yes, I've actually sketched up for discussion for the site development conditions roundtable discussion, an indicative site development area which would show where there's room for native landscaping, native hedging, hawthorn, blackthorn, field maple, which are ecological
Fair enough.
improvements
Within the red edge.
within the red edge, sir. Yes.
Okay, thanks. That it, Mr. Masters?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful if that assists me not returning for another
Okay,
particular day.
I hadn't
Thank
realised
you.
that was the consequence.
It may not, sir. Obviously, I don't know where we're going, but I'm hoping
Right.
that's the
yeah.
consequence.
Mr. Lintott.
Inspector, I just have, I won't repeat the cross-examination that I've done so far today. I've just got 3 questions. First of them is in relation to the enforcement notices that have been served because of the comment that was made by Mr. Masters at the beginning of the examination in chief. And that is the comment made in relation to the ditches. So can I just ask you to have a look, please, Mr. Rowe, at the 2 enforcement notices that appear in Appendix CW20, which is in Mr. Ward's supplemental proof of evidence.
I've got the one in front of me for plot 4, if that
Oh, brilliant.
helps. Do
Excellent.
you want the enforcement notice reference number?
No. So if you've got the inspector, yeah, Appendix 20. So as long as you've got it wherever you've got it, Mr. Rowe, that's all I need. Yeah, so it starts off with notices 02 and 83 at the top left-hand corner. It's really just the requirements, just so that you can have a look at those. If you look at the requirements in respect of what you're required to do you see there that little 3, it's got remove the hard standing, including that constructed over and within an ordinary watercourse.
Remove the hard standing, including construction over and within, yes, I do.
All right. So Inspector, that's that question.
In terms of the actual watercourse element to it, I'm not sure to the extent that obviously has a differing effect on each of the particular plots because the water, but it's the entrance basically, it's that little area.
I'm grateful, yeah. And then in terms, just out of curiosity, really, in terms of the second point is in respect of your TD1 point. I mean, I note that TD1 obviously is a townscape and design policy. I'm not going to cross-examine you on that. It's not something which is within the evidence for this inquiry, but I mean, we're really in the rural environment, aren't we? So you'd expect to see the rural environment policies, wouldn't you?
It is, but I don't think there's a separate, distinct rural design policy. So I find this at many councils that, yeah, there's not a distinction between urban design and rural design when these policies are used.
Okay, but in terms of judging levels of harm to landscape character and those sorts of things, you're going to look at the rural environment policies for that RE1, RE2, RE3, those policies, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, as we found, we saw with the Thatched House Farm decision, they looked at the same policies as they looked at with the appeal sites.
And then in terms of Thatched House Farm, can I just ask you to turn up Mr. Dudley's proof at CD A.2, CD 8A.2, and that's his rebuttal proof of evidence.
If you've got an unmarked copy, that may be easier for me to have rather because I've got the May one, but that's not the one you're referring to, is it?
Where it's, I mean, I'm not sure, it's CDA 8A.2, it's 5th of November 2024, that one. Maybe we've got an unmarked copy.
One second, yeah.
So it might be, the numbering might have changed to 10A.
Yeah,
Point.
I've not got up to speed with the link to the core documents,
Oh,
I'm
right.
afraid, sir. But I've got almost everything else.
But you've reminded me about that before, so I'm sorry about that.
I've got a landscape supplementary proof, but that's the May one. I've got, no, in simple terms, I'd struggle to put my hands on the rebuttal as quickly as others.
So Inspector's quite right. If you scroll through the link, it's in 10A. On
Yes,
my
sir.
documents, I've had it printed out when it was 8A, but it's in 10A.
Yeah,
I don't know, perhaps your side could provide you with a copy of that. If
that would be
if
quicker.
it's
I've
there.
not created a link to the core documents.
I do have a link, but it takes me some time to get it.
If it assists, I'm happy for you to read it out and comment on what
Well,
you're
I
going
think
to
Mr.
refer
Dudley's
to.
just going to, yeah,
Thank you.
thanks, Mr. Dudley.
I apologise. I'm grateful.
And so if you just have a look at page 9, and in particular, paragraph 3.6. And in respect of these buildings, really, Mr. Dudley is considering those buildings and the opposite report that you've put in. And the first point to note in respect of 3.6 is he looks at the type of activity within those buildings. And he says it's likely to be largely restricted to the buildings themselves, and therefore their relationship with their setting is largely passive. So that's one distinction in respect of that type of building, isn't it?
No, I'd disagree. If I can refer you back to the aerial photo on page 1 of my proof, that shows a significant amount of poaching of the area around the land. Now, typically breweries will also have open storage immediately adjacent to the buildings outside.
Are you familiar with the setup in respect of this particular brewery, these particular buildings?
I've not been onto the private land. I've not checked whether they've got a condition saying no external storage.
Right.
But equally, I'm looking at the size of the buildings and the land take as a result of those industrial buildings, except they appear agricultural. But
Well, that's the
I'm
next
also
point.
looking at the area of the curtilage that it's a very tight curtilage or plot size to the appeal sites.
Yeah. So in respect of that point, the agricultural appearance, you said in your evidence that you agreed with Mr. Dudley that if you didn't know about the permission, if you just went and looked at it on the ground, you said that you agree that they just look like agricultural buildings.
In terms of elevational design, yes. If I'm looking, that's all I've seen. Other than the glimpses that I can see from the Dunsfold Road and any glimpses you may see from public footpath design, vantage points. All I can comment on is, the elevations that were approved. Yes, I agree. They look to an agricultural design.
And it's common ground, I think. But I think could you just accept that farming is a key characteristic of this landscape?
What? Well, that's not common ground. Where do you say it's common ground?
Well,
Is this the
Alan,
statement of common ground?
Farming.
Mr. Masters, if
just
Mr. Orr doesn't
remarkable.
agree, he'll say so.
Just say, so would you agree that farming is a key characteristic of this landscape or not?
It's a good question. It's an interesting question. Farming may be a characteristic of it. I wouldn't say it's the key or predominant characteristic of the area anymore. There's a lot of paddock land, equestrian uses, commercial uses, Lydia Park itself, reuses of agricultural land for solar parks, solar farms. So no, I wouldn't, if you're saying key as in dominant, no, I'd disagree.
Okay. So, but the way we judge what the characteristic of the landscape is by looking at the landscape character assessment, isn't it? So have you done that to see what the landscape character assessments say?
Yes, yeah, in terms of open fields, but as I say, that I agree with Mr. Woods that I don't think the landscape assessment has been characterised correctly or rationally.
So what you're saying is because obviously the landscape character assessments.
I will agree. I will agree with you that farming is a characteristic, but I wouldn't say it's a key one in terms of farming.
Okay. So
But in terms of openness of fields, because that would presuppose that this buffer area was managed farmland. Clearly it wasn't. There's been no crop value off this site, and I doubt there was any crop value off around Thatched House Farm. It's, when you look at the aerial photos, it's not cultivated for hay. There's no hay cropping lines. It's not high grade agricultural land. So I accept that field patterns at best may be a characteristic. But as part of that, you've got hedging as part of it. But no, I disagree with that farming per se is a key characteristic of this landscape.
So where it says within the description that Mr. Dudley has put forward for this landscape that key characteristics include historic scattered landscape pattern associated with woodland management, grazing of animals, farming and industrial activity, you say, well, you accept that's a identified characteristic within the documentation, but you don't think it's a key characteristic. Is that a fair description?
I think historically, I think that's correct. But what's not been correctly given weight by Mr. Dudley, and where I agree with Mr. Woods, is he's not fast forwarded on from historical to actually look at what is on the ground now. I'd certainly say other parts of Waverley have a farming as a key characteristic, but I wouldn't say because of the ground conditions in this particular part of the district, farming isn't a key characteristic.
And so in terms of your proof of evidence, you've got the picture on the first page where you're looking at the light industrial use at Thatched House Farm.
Yes.
The fields to the left of the ones that you've identified there, the ones on the very left hand of the image, what are those fields being used for? Do you know?
I can't tell from this. And equally, in fairness to Mr. Dudley, I understand why he took the 2018 aerial image and may have been criticised for that, because some of the aerial images, like you see on this particular one, have cloud cover. So if you see the right-hand side of the aerial photo,
Okay.
again, that's something that the inspector may be able to see from his footpath positions he's taken to us, to what extent he can see historic field arrangements.
Yeah, well, that's fair. And then in terms of the third point Mr. Dudley makes, he says that the industrial scheme is located directly adjacent to existing units. So plainly that's a consideration as well in terms of looking at how the officers have looked at that particular decision, isn't it?
But why would they take that decision distinct from mobile homes adjacent to existing Lydia Park?
Well, that's a matter of judgment based upon the facts of the particular case, and we've had a lot of cross-examination on the location of these sites and where they are in relation to the wooded stream corridor, etc., etc. But that's clearly a material consideration for the officers looking at this factor, isn't it? And
For both sites,
otherwise. Yeah,
it's an analogous consideration. They differed in their consideration for Thatched House Farm. I agree with the principle of clustering buildings together.
Inspector, that's all the questions I've got. Thank you very much.
Do I need this anymore?
Yes.
I'll keep it. Thank you.
No other questions?
Wait a minute, Mr. Masters. Stay there, Mr. Rowe, a minute. Councillor O'Sullivan, do you have any questions for Mr. Rowe on landscape? If you'd like to come down then, please find a microphone.
Sarah Sullivan, for the 4 joint parish councils, thank you for allowing me to ask you a question. The question is, surrounding this area, you're talking about a brewery, like it's a big thing. They have sheep and they have cattle and there are pigs. The pigs consume the leftover stuff from the brewery. Around that area, it's surrounded by cattle to the north and to the west. There are sheep. To the south west, there are also sheep and cattle. So it's very hard to say that this isn't a farming area. My question is not so much a question, but a point that it is
Councillor,
agricultural.
you do have to make it into a question at this stage.
Okay. My question is, why do you not think that this is not agricultural land? I've known this land all my life, and it has been used, including the appeal sites, as agricultural land surrounding Thatched House Farm. Why do you not think it's agricultural land?
I'm not disputing that there's some agricultural land. My point is twofold, that historically it would have, farming would have been much more of a key characteristic. I think when you look at things in isolation, you may still believe farming is a key characteristic. But clearly, when you look at the raft of other inspectors' decisions that we can't ignore, that have happened, that it's no longer just an open farming landscape. I cover a lot of Surrey and Sussex. There's areas that, yeah, I would agree with my learned friend that farming is a key characteristic. I wouldn't say that's the case here. Yeah, you say there's pigs, there's cows. I've got no evidence to dispute that. I've not seen that in anyone's evidence. You know, if that's the case, then I accept that farming still does go on, but clearly farmers are looking to diversify. Hence, they're looking for buildings for rural economic development, industrial type buildings for breweries. That's the evolution. Now, if you're saying to me, is rural diversification of farms still a farming as key characteristic, I'd agree with you there in the middle. But I think the point that's being made to me is the undevelopedness of open, large fields for cropping, for livestock. With the quality of the agricultural land here, yeah, I may stand corrected that there may be certain types of livestock, sheep, pigs. Obviously, pigs don't keep land virgin green, do they? So pigs do not keep land virgin green. They turn land into rutted, brown, muddy fields. But yeah, I've got no evidence to dispute whether there are cattle or sheep livestock in this area. I've not seen any or heard any evidence.
Anything else, councillor?
No, nothing else. We'll find out on our walk when we take the walk
Okay,
to the fracking site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Hang on. I've got nothing, Mr. Rowe. Mr. Masters, have you any re-examination?
We've been lucky enough to have the planning consent that was granted for the. Yeah, we're going back to the brewery consent. Have you got a copy?
I've only got the extracts that I put in my
Well,
proof.
I'll read out. Yeah.
What I did include in my proof, just for completeness, was the planning condition about tree planting on that site.
It's the opposite report. Yep. I'm going to paraphrase this as I can. This wasn't an existing farm. This was an existing craft brewery already in existence. What the proposal was to have a packing plant, canning and whatever, a car park so that lorries and cars can come and deliver matters of that sort. It's just to go through. The proposal involves the construction of 3 new buildings in a rural area. Type of use of the proposal will result in visitors to the rural area. And then the employee. I'm in page, it's not numbered, it's the 3rd sheet, halfway down. It's halfway down on the first page. The proposal will involve the construction of 3 new buildings in the rural area. Type of use is proposed to result in visitors to the rural area, mainly employees and operation deliveries. Proposal seeks to enhance the site, new buildings following the success of the existing craft brewery business on the site. So we can see that not a farm, an existing craft business that's done well and it's getting better. It's acknowledged that the proposal would result in car reliant and result in cars visit the site. This in itself is not considered the result of the proposed being unsustainable due to the wider likely benefits the proposal brings, and then provision and retention of small scale employment and enterprise. The brewery itself to further benefit local surrounding businesses such as public health, which use and purchase of public producers. It's not just the impact of the building, it's going to be the impact of government scales. And we can see what that involves. We turn over the page. But before I get there, there's also site also impacted on the designated heritage asset. I'm in the 4th page now, sir.
I think I recall that Thatched House Farm was listed.
Yeah. Exactly. And although it was listed and it did impact, they granted it anyway. Which is what they did. And this turn on yes. Yes. Impact on designated heritage assets. Do you see the underlining? That's the heading. Well, they come to the conclusion that there was, and obviously you have to read it. Paragraph 104 states the local plan for should require an applicant describe the significance of any heritage assets and then it goes on. Yeah, I'm just trying to. You need to ask a question.
You can't just be reading extracts from the report. You've got to put a question in re-examination to Mr. Rowe.
But the council's historic building officer raised no objection to the impact of the asset, which is why it didn't go ahead, so you'll find that on page 5. Does that surprise you?
If the question's to me, does it surprise me? No, all I'd say that this has been permitted as a larger quantum of development compared to ours against a context of more planning considerations. So heritage was a consideration there. It was still allowed. Heritage doesn't form part of our consideration. The only thing I'd additionally point out is that the officer report talks about that any lighting installed on the 3 buildings and the associated car parks. So we're not just looking at the quantum of 3 agricultural style buildings, we're looking at car parks, will not be visible from the AONB. So that had a condition not excluding lighting, but not to be visible from the AONB. Now, you've got the benefit, sir, that you requested a copy of the decision notice. I've not seen that, but I should think there was a not dissimilar condition to one we will request you consider about lighting.
Do you consider
Having,
the
sorry, just
analysis made by Mr. Dudley? You remember his evidence, and you cross-examined on this from the learned friend. Now that you've read this document, you said that it's difficult to see.
I think it's a very scant analysis by Mr. Dudley. Except in his rebuttal proof, he has acknowledged they're industrial buildings rather than just saying they're agricultural style buildings. But even that depth of professional analysis is substantially limited and overlooks the associated car parks. To me, that even if it doesn't allow open storage, that's allowing the incidence of domestic cars, lorry movements visiting it, which would be wholly distinct from agricultural style activity.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. That's all the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Masters. That's helpful. Right. Next up, I think, should be Mr. Smythe.
Yes, Inspector.
Can you give me, I'm aware of the time, I'm also aware of where we're up to in the inquiry. Can you just give me an update on how long you think?
Well,
Examination chief.
well, Inspector, I'll be as quick as I can. I probably said something like an hour and a half.
You
in
did, yes.
And it probably will be something in that region. I'll try and keep it short, but there's a fair bit to get through.
There is, yes.
I don't want to rush it, but then we have got time to deal with it. I'm conscious of we are slipping in terms of the inquiry timetable.
Yeah. And the difficulty with continuing a bit this evening is I think there's a meeting in this room starting at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
This evening.
There's been a long day. Suggesting we go on much beyond 5.
Yeah, I'm in terms of your witness, if we start Mr. Smythe now and even got half an hour, then
Yeah, no, Inspector. I mean, thank you for reminding me. I mean, I would have started if we could have continued, because I think we should. But with the rooms being used, then we have to stop.
Yeah, we couldn't go on we couldn't go beyond 5:30 and be out in time for the meeting.
Yeah, I agree.
Which I think means we've got to defer Mr. Smythe again. unfortunately, till tomorrow morning. Right.
Can I just say that as a result of the flooding expert arriving on behalf of my learned friends' clients, that we do have an alternative flooding condition that we would like to put to the local planning authority, that they have a
Well,
time to consider before
By all means,
Mr.
yes.
Smythe gives his evidence, so they can see what will be
I'm sure
arguing for.
there's a facility to do that outside the inquiry. That can be exchange of emails or discussions after we've adjourned today. Yeah. Anything else, Mr. Cottle, you want to raise?
No, thank you.
Anything, Mr. Masters?
Am I required tomorrow in any shape or form? Unlikely if it's Smythe and. I'm just wondering whether my attendance is likely required as to how far we're going to get. I appreciate we're behind if we're doing flooding tomorrow and the
Well,
councillors returning tomorrow.
It depends very much on how your team is presenting its case. On the timetable, you're down as to speak for appellant C&D on flood risk. But that's not for me.
Thank you.
Mr. Lintott, is there anything you wish to raise?
No, thank you, Inspector.
Okay. That case, we're adjourned until 10 tomorrow morning.
There's nothing I can add on flood risk, is there really? It's not going to be torn to pieces by the expert, it's on flooding. Brian may be in a better standing, but I think he may get found wanting as well, but the direction of trying to agree a condition is sensible.
Yeah.
I see no merit in me coming along as an expert flood witness. Thank you. Oh, the day off. Not the day off, but catch up back on the work.